You're listening to
and such a short amount of time to do it in.
a Mamma Mia podcast.
Hi, I'm Mia Friedman, and I have no filter. Welcome to No Filter, a podcast series where I chat to interesting people in the media industry about their careers, their families, and life. It's a one-on-one conversation without a filter. Joining me on the podcast today is Georgie Gardner, journalist, mother, and former Today Show newsreader. Georgie's worked on every commercial news station in Australia, and she's one of the country's most experienced news journalists. For the past 13 years, she's worked for the Nine Network, and for the last 7, she's been setting her alarm for 3 o'clock in the morning as the Today Show's newsreader. On No Filter today, I chat to Georgie about why she decided to leave the Today Show, having more children, and her upbringing, which wasn't always easy.
Don't look at me like that.
I'm looking at you with love.
Oh, good.
And I'm not the only one that looks at you with love.
Oh, stop.
You are actually, I was on YouTube looking for a particular clip of you this morning, and I happened upon some of the comments. There are some people who love you quite hard and quite inappropriately.
Oh, is that right?
But, you know, when we worked together at Channel 9, and I didn't know you at all then, and I didn't know what I was doing then, but I remember when I was put in charge of the hair and makeup and the wardrobe department, which was a career highlight for me, I did say, people, the gold standard is Georgie. And that is because I always listened to what you said, because you looked consistently like you. It doesn't seem to be a question. This seems to just be me trying to ask you out on a date.
Yes.
You were just always absolutely yourself. Now, I wanted to ask, what you did do is leave before you were axed, in terms of leaving the Today Show. Now, that's very unusual for women in television, and I wanted to ask how you pulled that off.
Well, I don't think it's restricted just to women. I think it can be a brutal industry for men as well.
Do you think that?
Yeah, I do.
Who's brutal? Who's been
Oh, now
brutalised?
you've got to ask me to name names.
Because I'm thinking of, I won't name them, but a bunch of guys who have still got jobs, who are still on air when they're in their 50s, when they're in their 60s, when they've been there many, many years, possibly past their prime, and I don't just mean their physical
All right.
prime.
Well, I guess what my initial thought with that comment was that I haven't ever sort of segregated it and thought women get a worse deal on that front. But I don't. There was no plan, Mia. There's never been a plan. It was just an instinct and a gut feeling that I was coming to the end of my tenure, and I guess I got to that because I was looking at how things were going on the home front, and that has always been of paramount importance to me, as much as I love my career, and I had 7 amazing years on the Today Show, some of which I got to share with you. But I felt that something had to give because my children were getting to an age where they really needed me to be focused, and I wanted to be the one doing the after-school pickup or getting the bag organised for school camp or whatever it might be. I didn't want to palm it off to someone else.
But why couldn't you do that if I'm playing devil's advocate? If you were finished work at 9, perfect job for a mum.
Correct, but I was exhausted. I was shattered. 7 years of getting up at 3:30 in the morning.
What does it do to you?
Oh, well, it puts you in just a constant stupor of exhaustion, and things get blown out of proportion, and everyone handles it differently, but sleep deprivation is a very real thing, and I found that I was getting shorter and shorter in terms of my sort of patience levels, and I thought, my kids don't deserve this, actually. And also, I just felt that, I feel that everything is cyclical, and I feel that we had a fabulous 7 years, well, I did with the team, and I thought to myself, there are a handful of these sort of positions and jobs in the country. I've just had the privilege and honour of filling one of those roles for 7 years. If I can't now give it 100, it was contract time, and I thought, if I can't give this 100%, then I shouldn't be sitting here. I should give someone else an opportunity. So there was no grand plan. It was just it was a realisation that I guess came about over the course of about 4 to 6 months. And it was, in the end, really a very easy decision.
When it is contract time, do you have to commit for a number of years? Because it can be very hard to know how you're going to feel in a number of years.
Yeah, well, everyone has, I think, probably different arrangements, but for me, I'd always signed 2-year contracts. And
was the temptation just another 2 years?
No, once I made my decision, that was it. It was actually very easy. And I had a couple of voices in my head from outside sources saying career suicide. Why would you do that? Oh, no. What does that say? In fact, there was an article on Mamamia that you alerted me to, and I read it and thought, oh, what does this mean? And I think that the essence of the article was saying, oh, no, if you're not coping, how can the rest of us cope? Because you always look like you're coping. Now, I've never professed to be on top of everything. I'm the last person to keep all the balls in the air, and it's such an individual thing. But for me, I just felt, you know, as I say, the time was up, and I felt so incredibly lucky to do it on my terms and to have a very understanding network. I can only speak from my experience, but David Gyngell was phenomenal and supportive and just said, well, we support your decision. And I must say, speaking of contracts, at that point, I fully intended him to go, so I was ready for him to say, well, I don't know what else we've got here for you. But to the contrary, he just said, I want to sign you up for 5 years. And
But George, that's not out of the goodness of his heart. That's because you're bloody good at what you do. You are an extraordinary asset to that network. He's no dummy, and you're not a charity case.
No, I'm not a charity case, but I'm also, and this isn't false modesty, I never assume anything. I never... I'm one of
extraordinarily humble in the
industry.
industry.
No, I'm not, Mia. I'm not. I'm a realist, and nothing is guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed in this life, you know. So why would I assume that having? I mean, that was my currency, the Today Show. I mean, I've always kept on with my news as well as a journalist, but the Today Show is where I've, I guess, built up a bit of a profile and I sort of viewed that as my currency for 7 years. So I was not being silly. I was half expecting him to say, well, we'll have to see if we can find something.
Tommy Malone said that one of the things he really wanted to do when he cast you in that, not cast you, but put you in, you know, he was casting the Today Show, and he was Lisa. It is a cast, and he was trying to create a family, and he was trying to go away from just the 2-host model to more of a 4-host model, and he said he wanted Australia to get to know Georgie because as a newsreader, which you'd been better known for, which has always been, you know, your background, I suppose, for a big chunk of your career, there was a huge other side to you that Tommy knew, and those people who knew you, I didn't know that back then, but you're naughty and you're cheeky and you're irreverent and you're funny and you're self-deprecating. Most people wouldn't know that about you. What was it like letting that mask down a little bit?
It was terrifying. It was really terrifying, and it really came to the fore with the inception of the Grill, where we really got to sit down and Tommy said to me, I want you to speak from the heart. I want you to just always speak from the heart. And I found that it's not that I find it difficult to speak from the heart, but it's one thing to speak from the heart to you and to people close to me, but to speak to, you know, a national audience was
and give
daunting,
your opinions, which is the opposite of what you'd done as a journalist.
Correct. So it was taking off my news hat and putting on that Georgie Gardner hat, and then often having to quickly flip that one off and then go and read the news straight after I'd done the Grill.
What's that gear change like?
It was a great challenge, and I surprised myself. That and you know, I know it sounds a bit twee, but I've said this to Tom Malone. He gave me wings because he really did say to me, I want Australia to get to know you, because there's another side that I think, you know, will resonate. And I really thank him for that, because he was one of the first people and men, certainly in my industry, who gave me that confidence and said, just be you. And it's a beautiful gift to give someone, because really when you're giving someone, when you're putting forward that invitation, anything could happen, you know, flaws and all.
You really have to trust an executive producer when you're on the air, don't
Absolutely.
you? Because their fingerprints aren't on anything. No one even knows their name outside the industry. So if they tell you to do something, you do it. How do you develop that trust?
Well, look, I was so lucky working with him, and I really hope I get to work with him again. I do occasionally do the odd 60-minute story because he's a unique individual. He has extraordinary insight. He knows TV
He's
very
a freak.
well. Yeah, he is.
He's an old man.
So really, I didn't have to do much. He guided and supported and encouraged. You know, there's not enough encouragement.
No.
And he encouraged and brought me out of my shell because, you know me, I'm not one to sort of beat my own drum and push myself forward. I tend to probably retreat a bit, and he really encouraged me. And what I found, it was a really fascinating time because I found the more I gave of myself, and there were times when I remember I used to be quite anxious leading up to the grill, thinking I really want to hammer home this and I'm passionate about that. And I'd be getting so, you know, barely concentrating on the news I was meant to be reading because I was so fired up, ready to... And every time I went out on a limb, I got the most amazing feedback.
That's because you're such an enigma. You know, some people would see you as aloof, but it's actually just that you're shy and that you have that natural reserve. And so that when you do speak your mind, everyone leans in because you don't shoot your mouth off. You're not on Twitter going blah, blah, blah and taking a million selfies and on every red carpet. So when you do have something to say, I lean in to listen. And you were always so well prepared. Every time we did the grill together, you always thought really carefully about what you wanted to say. And you spoke passionately. That's the other thing. People never knew what you thought when you were reading the news. But it was fascinating to hear some of your opinions were really unexpected. There was a raunchy side of you that people hadn't seen.
You always brought that one up.
I loved a bit of that. And now that you're doing mornings, have you got more freedom to be a little bit that as well?
Yeah, mornings is a continuation, I guess, of that. And that's, you know, it's another lovely opportunity, at times a potential platform to share opinions and thoughts. And, you know, I certainly don't always get it right.
But I wanted to ask you about newsreading and what you bring as a journalist to that, because you're not you don't just read auto cue. Like, what's the process of, do you rework the copy? Do you...
Yeah, well, I'm very...
Isn't that a good question?
We have a fantastic team in the 9 newsroom who obviously build the news bulletin from the beginning of the day, and at the time I come in, we are probably sort of around lunchtime, maybe late morning, and we're deciding editorially on what stories we should cover, what order they should go in, and they very kindly it's very collaborative, so they allow me to voice my thoughts and opinions, and then we are still often having good, vigorous tussles and debates about story order and all of that sort of thing, right up to 5 to 6 sometimes. But then, so that's that side of it, and then obviously the gist of all the different stories are written, and then my job, in terms of the writing side, I come in and rework intros just to according to how I like to read.
And how do you like to read? Because I imagine how something's written for you is different, or how you work something is different. Because it always feels like you're just speaking to me. It doesn't feel like you're reading someone else's words.
Well, thank you, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to put it into my words as much as possible. And to me, it's funny, when I started out, the goddess, she still is in my view, was Jana Wendt. So you had this whole swathe of women coming through journalism school,
trying to be Jana,
trying to sound like Jana. And I remember thinking, well, I'm never going to achieve that. Jana's in a different stratosphere. I can't emanate Jana. But what I can do is I can disseminate news, but hopefully people at home are feeling like I'm talking to them as opposed to talking at them. So women young sort of graduates got into this really funny sort of mode of like doing all this, tonight, like all this over the top and all these silly inflections and emphasis that was all, it's not how you talk to people. And even now, to me it jars when you hear someone
like,
trying
tonight,
to... I put on my
60
news
minutes.
voice, and it's just talk to me. Talk to me.
It's hard though. It's hard when you're reading to make it sound like you're talking. That's hard. The other thing you do extraordinarily well is, and it's not a choice, but the other thing that you do is walk that very fine line by showing that you've been affected by a distressing piece of news that you've had to deliver. Because let's face it, you don't deliver a lot of good news.
No.
And not losing it. How do you walk that line?
Oh, well, I have lost it occasionally.
I was reading about that. I didn't realise that you had lost it on air, talking about a close friend of yours who died.
Yeah, a couple of things. And I mean, I won't bore you with all the background to that particular story.
No,
but that
please
was,
do.
Well, it was
because I didn't know you then.
Okay, well, so that was when I just pretty much started on the Today Show, and one of my very closest school friends' husband died in really awful circumstances in Perth, Chris Mainwaring, and it was all at the time of the Ben Cousins debacle, but it was very messy and,
Awful.
If you sort of picture the whole Ben Cousins scene,
yes.
I think you're on
Yeah.
par with... Yeah, anyway, I'd found out over the weekend, and I'd spoken to Tom on the weekend and said, that's
Your
the
boss,
husband
yeah.
of a very good friend of mine, and obviously he's a friend as well, and I'm in shock. But don't worry, I'll be at work, first thing Monday morning. And I'd also, in the back of my mind, thought this is a very West Australian story, because he was very big in WA. He was a former footballer, but he was also
You're a Perth girl.
I'm a Perth girl. He was also a very popular radio host and a big name in Perth. And I thought, okay, so Chris Mainwaring's dead, big news in Perth. I'm feeling sick for my beautiful school friend, but it probably won't even really make the news anywhere else. And I got in that morning, and all of a sudden I just saw all the front pages of all the newspapers, and it was all about him. And you know what it's like. You get in at 4 a.m. and you're on air at 5:30, and you don't really have time to... And all of a sudden I was on air and I was reading this bulletin and keeping it together, and then I glanced down at the monitor to see the vision that they were rolling, and there was my beautiful friend out the front of the house, just in an absolute distressed state, collapsing on the front lawn. And I just... I couldn't go on. And... So, if I had my time again, I perhaps would have said to Tom, if we're running this story, perhaps I won't. We might get someone else to read the news that day. But I didn't know. And I copped a bit of flack for that.
Did you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
From who and why?
Oh, from viewers saying that's your role and we don't want to see... We don't want to see that.
And get a
that's
robot
your
to
duty.
read the news.
And I didn't pay much attention to it because I thought, well, guess what? I'm like anyone else. I have emotions, and if only you knew. There are so many times when you hold it together, when you would love to fall in a heap and you don't. But that one was just too close to home.
How do you hold it together at other times?
Well, you just do. That is the job, and it doesn't mean that you don't feel. It doesn't mean that you don't get off set and go into your hop into the car and have a little tear on the way home. I've done that many times. But that is part of the job, and I pride myself on doing just that. Because at the end of the day, I am the deliverer of information, and people want the news.
You've done a few covers of the Women's Weekly, and the whole other side of your job is publicity, which as a journalist is kind of odd, because you are meant to be the deliverer of the information. But with that, particularly once you're on the Today Show, comes a big public interest in Georgie Gardner, the person, your family, your story. How does that sit when you have to be, not wheeled out, but when you have to do these interviews and there's an expectation when you do the Women's Weekly that you will give something over to get that cover, or, for them to run a story?
Yeah.
How does that feel?
Weird. It is weird. And I was probably a bit naive going into the first one of those, because I am an oversharer and I probably overshared a bit, and I to a certain extent, regret that. But
You spoke about your family.
yeah, which is pretty messy. And sadly, I've got a brother who still isn't talking to me 3 years on.
So why did you decide to do that? There was a reason. There must have been a
Well,
reason.
because they said, we want to know your story. And my story is a bit complicated, and it's not white picket fence and...
You don't look like you've got a complicated story. You look like the girl with everything.
Yeah, but what does that look like?
You.
Well...
That's why I think, for as long as I've known you, you've been incredibly generous and incredibly passionate about women being honest and authentic and supporting each other.
Yeah, and I guess I guess when they said, we want to know your story, I felt I had to tell the bits that were perhaps a bit unpalatable for some members of my family. Their argument was, well, it's not your right to share that publicly. We didn't ask for that to be shared publicly. And my argument to this particular sibling was, well, it's not your life, it's my story, and you might not like some parts of it.
But it happened to you.
But it didn't happen to you, it happened to me. And I know this is all sounding very obscure, but the gist of it was, parts of it were dysfunctional, turbulent, and very unhappy. And I guess in telling my story, people are prone to going, well, you've got it all, or you look like you've had a breezy, cruisy upbringing. Well, very few people do have a breezy, cruisy upbringing that's perfect. And what is perfect? So I guess it was just me, it's me. It's just, it is what it is. I say it as it is. I'm not going to pretend it was something else. And it's not that, but what I was also trying to get across with all of that is it's not woe be me. I am so lucky. I've had an amazing journey, and I'm so privileged in every sense of the word. So that was what I was also trying to get across.
It's just part of who you are.
It's part of who I am.
It's part of how you got here.
There are bumpy bits and ugly bits, and there are some beautiful, smooth bits. But it's if the Woman's Weekly put me on the cover and wanted to know my story, I'm not going to embellish and rub out the bits that are a bit ugly.
We've often talked about, are we done having children? Do you know when you're done? Are you 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 done? You done?
No, I'll never be done.
Do you think you'll never be done? Because
Yeah.
I feel done.
Yeah, I'll never be done.
I feel too old. Did you want to have more kids?
Oh, desperately. I still feel completely unfinished on that front. But again, I've got to be careful saying that, because I've got two healthy, beautiful children. I've even got one of each. How perfect. I pushed Angus out and everyone said, oh, pigeon pair, perfect, done. Well, guess what? I wasn't done. I desperately wanted more. But, I'm loath to say that, because then there are people saying, well, I haven't got any, or I've only got one. How lucky are you? You've got two. I know I'm lucky. But it doesn't take away from the immense pain I felt from losing two after Angus. And I'm 44. I still have hope that another one will come. I know it won't, and I've come to that realisation that those years are behind me. Doesn't mean you stop wanting.
Would you go, yes, our eggs have packed it in.
No.
Because we're in our 40s.
No, because...
You wouldn't go the egg route or
No, and I considered it when... so I lost two after Angus and considered it. The next obvious step for me was IVF. And I might say I conceived them easily, but obviously it was just... And to this day I've got no explanation as to why I couldn't have them. But I made the decision, or Tim and I thankfully made the decision together, that we felt... I mean, if I didn't have any and I only had one, without question, I would have embarked on anything. But I had two healthy, beautiful little babies looking up at me, needing me, and I thought, so I could go down this path of desperately pursuing this third baby, no guarantee that I'll get it, and potentially... because women tell me how obsessive you become with going down that route, potentially then I'm missing out on these two little beings who are looking up at me and needing me, all for the sake of wanting something that might not even happen. And it wasn't a decision I took lightly, but I stand by that decision. Because I didn't, because those beautiful 2 children needed me to be focused on them, and I wanted to be. And that, but you know, again, my decision, Tim's and my decision, might not be the same decision for the next person. And also, that was all happening at the time of the Today Show, and I knew that I was pretty sure I wouldn't be able to keep fronting up to work and putting on the face and presenting and doing that, plus looking after 2 little children, plus pursuing the dream of having the 3rd baby.
It was too much.
Too much.
I once remember being on the Today Show set, and it was right after Lily Allen had a stillborn baby, and they had the Emma, I've forgotten her name, but the head of the Stillbirth Foundation, and me. And Tommy asked if I'd stay and talk about, losing a baby.
Yep.
And we did, and Lisa did the interview, and she steeled herself to do the interview, and then we went to a commercial break.
And we all...
No, we weren't all, and it was I thought about this a long time afterwards. You and Lisa were really upset, and we all had a cry, and we had a cuddle and everything. I was dry-eyed, and so was Emma. And I thought about that afterwards, and I thought, why were we weren't crying. Like, we were affected, but we were actually really okay. And I realised it's because after we lost our babies, we had other babies. Whereas with you and Lise, you didn't,
I've often thought about that too.
Yeah, I've often thought about it. That. And someone once said to me, when I'm trying to make sense of it, I'm like, when I have my baby in my arms, I'll understand why I lost that baby. And it's true. There's, you don't ever get over it, but it helps.
Does it? Yeah.
And I think that there is an openness to that wound.
Yes. When
you don't have a baby after a miscarriage, that it's just a different kind of grief.
Okay, that's I love you articulating that, because I often feel a bit odd that I feel so empty still about it.
That's why. And Lisa, I don't want to speak for her, but I'll speak for her.
Yeah, well,
she's the same.
Yeah,
she's the same because she had 2 miscarriages after her last child.
Yeah,
and we've talked about how that's different.
Yeah,
and how you can. Yeah, it's just different.
Yeah.
But, you're so, just by speaking about it, I think you give such a gift to women, because I'm with you. I'm all about breaking down doesn't she look like she's got a great... What's that expression? The mistake most people make is comparing their real lives with other people's show reels.
Oh, ain't that the truth?
Yeah, and it's like your highlight reel, all of our highlight reels look pretty good.
Pretty embarrassing.
But then there's the reel. But you are just... You're amazing. Like, the more I've got to know you, and everyone in here is obsessed with you. I don't know if you realise how people get obsessed with you. Men as well.
Oh, for God's sake.
Don't read the comments ever on YouTube, though. Can I just
I
say?
I know how to find them. I'm such a Luddite.
I'm so happy, because there's some really quite inappropriate love for you on YouTube.
Oh, gosh.
Yes.
I need to post a school photo of myself. I was the ugliest, plainest, most...
Were you?
Oh, God, yes.
That's what all supermodels say. I was such a...
No, see, now you're making me feel
No,
like...
but were you really?
Totally.
I'm going to take you up on that.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be hard to dig and find it. But, chubby, plain, self-conscious, but always, funnily enough, had a very strong sense of self. And just thought, well, okay, I don't look like that, and I'm too embarrassed to go to the beach, and I'm this and that, and don't have a boyfriend, and about the only thing I didn't have was pimples, so that was one lucky break. But, I just remember thinking, well, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I don't have to sort of necessarily dance to the beat of that drum. I can find a different way, and there'll be a man out there who likes my chubby cheeks, or...
And then along came Tim and Tom. Among others.
Anyway.
What's next?
Enough about me.
Yeah, enough about me. Let's talk about Tony Abbott. No, what's next?
Oh, let's not.
What's next? Can you ever answer that question?
What's next? I've never posed that... I've never put that pressure on myself. I know, it does sound a bit corny, but I'm in a really happy place.
Good.
I feel, I feel incredibly invested in my kids. I find them, they drive me mad, but they also, I'm intrigued.
Oh, intrigued is such a great word.
Intrigued by them. And I look at them proudly and think, okay, what can I do better? You know, how can I help shape and stand back and then lean in and pull away and give them independence and instill values and manners and compassion, but also let them, you know, they're both such free spirits and they're strong and determined. And although that can drive me nuts, I love that about them.
It's a real privilege, isn't it?
Such a privilege, because we are the vessels, you know, they are their own people, and I'm loving that experience. So,
and just watching who they become.
Oh, it is a privilege. So I'm loving that. I'm really enjoying work. I'm enjoying just being. I'm enjoying having a bit more energy to give back to my friends. And, you know, who knows what's next, but I'm excited by it, whatever it is, and open to it.
Your eyes match that dress. I love you.
Love you right back. Oh. And your left shoulder.
It's my bra, you were just playing. Thanks for listening to the No Filter podcast series. Tune in next time to hear me talk to Paul Murray. It's a really special episode, don't miss that one. Find out more about this podcast on the Mamma Mia Podcast Network Facebook page or on my Facebook page, Mia Friedman Online. This podcast was produced by Monique Bowley, researched by Eliza Ratliff, and hosted by me, Mia Friedman. See you next time.